down to me, the big dog, the boss, the Don. And you want to know how to beat the top meta Yu-Gi-Oh decks? I tell you what, I'll lend you this info, but this is a favor that the Don needs to be paid back on. Subscriptions, your allegiance and likes, and watch those ads. Or else, Squamata's gonna be knowing what you're doing. Today, not only will I be giving you the information on beating these top meta Yu-Gi-Oh decks, I'll also be giving you all of the insight that you need to know. My guy, Voiceless Voice won't be able to say anything. Sinful Spoils will be spoiled rotten, and Fire Kings will be on fire. Wait, what? Of course, big dog, I hope that your day is going phenomenal. But if it isn't, don't let what happened at the beginning of your day ruin the rest of your day. Let's go ahead and jump on in. So the best way to get you all of the information you need to be able to counter the top Yu-Gi-Oh decks, probably easier to break it down into different sections. I'll start off by talking about every single one of these decks' biggest strengths, and then some of the most popular ways to be able to counter these strategies. Next, I'll even talk about side deck options that you should consider to beat these decks, and then, as a bonus, even some strategies that are really good against those particular decks. Now, of course, if you want to know about some decks that are extremely strong against the top Yu-Gi-Oh decks, I just so happen to have made a rogue tier list, so be sure to check that out. But let's go ahead and start off by talking about one of the most powerful strategies in the game, in Voiceless Voice. Dog, to be honest, I have no idea how Voiceless Voice went from rogue to meta counter guide in a week, but we're here. Voiceless Voice is the new strategy from Phantom Nightmare that is based on ritual summoning. Its deck's biggest strength is that it can make cards like Infinite Impermanence and Effect Veiler look stupid, because not only does it have monsters like Seraphis that helps mitigate targeting, its spell card also prevents you from targeting when it has a ritual monster and low on the field. The biggest thing about this deck is that once it gets going, it's incredibly hard to stop. So let's talk about how to prevent it from getting going in the first place. If you are using cards like Infinite Impermanence and Effect Veiler, be sure to use this card's effect on monsters like Low or Diviner of Herald. Now, I know I said that this deck can make those cards look completely silly, but this is going to be the strongest point to be able to stop those particular cards, because that's what it uses to get the deck going. Essentially, using these cards on those particular monsters puts your opponent on, hey, do you got the Seraphis? Because if they don't, it's huge. This also means that your Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring should be used almost exclusively on their pre-preparation of rites and their Saphira Queen Dragon of Voiceless Voice. Now, I'm not gonna lie, this may not always stop them, but it gives you incredible value. But if you notice that your opponent doesn't have Saphira or pre-preparations of rites, it's actually okay to use Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring's effect when your opponent uses the effect of Trias Hierarchius to be able to tribute the Diviner of Herald. The main reason is because this prevents them from getting into Low. That's huge. Low of the Voiceless Voice is the most important card for this deck, and every single one of our points of interruptions should be to slowing that girl down. Now, moving on to the most impactful hand traps, it easily has to be DD Crow and Ghost Spell, and you won't believe what we're using them on. You can guess. Don't say that stupid thing. You should be using Ghost Bell, DD Crow, or the Bestial monsters if you're playing them against Low. Preventing Low from being special summoned back to the side of the field means that their most powerful monster, Skull Guardian, can no longer interrupt you. It also means that Barrier of the Voiceless Voice can't provide protection, meaning that's a lot easier to be able to beat the deck. Now, I've been doing pretty good at telling you what hand traps to use where, but I'm pretty sure when you get clapped up in game one, what exactly do you do for the side deck? It's actually incredibly simple. If you're not mainboarding Ghost Bells and DD Crows, well, consider using them in your sideboard. As for some other cards that are really good against them, you'd be surprised when I say cards like Lightning Storm, Harpy's Feather Duster, and Cosmic Cyclone are amazing. A lot of this deck's strength does come from Radiance of the Voiceless Voice and Barrier of the Voiceless Voice. Being able to prevent them from getting recursion, being able to get them free searches, or disruption is huge, if you can take those cards out, you'll be in a way better position. Ironically, there's also Forbidden Droplet. Since the Voiceless voice deck is based on its monster presence on the field, Forbidden Droplets can negate all of their monsters, and if they are summoning Shuttle Window on their side of the field, it also outs that card too, and it halves their attack, making it a little bit easier for you to go for game. What really hurts this deck is Bestial-based decks. Sometimes stopping the low from being summoned from the graveyard isn't enough, but being able to permanently get rid of it and also have a deck that can get rid of any of their monsters in the graveyard is huge. So if you're playing a deck like Bestial Synchro, Dragon Link, those are awesome. And another crazy thing about the Voiceless voice deck is that it can be overwhelmed with card effects. If you're using a deck like Vanadium, which can just keep on activating effects and doesn't care about your negations, you can have a really good matchup against Voiceless Voice, as it only can stop so many things. But now that I've given you the keys to clap up Voiceless Voice, it's time to move on the Fire King. They lose it. Fire King is an incredibly powerful deck that's built on being able to destroy your own cards to gain resources. I think the real reason why this deck is so popular right now is that it's incredibly sticky. Anytime the monsters are gotten rid of, they just snack that just keeps smiling back. Especially with the new Snake Eyes cards that are being used inside of Fire Kings, the deck becomes fairly formidable, but it's not unbeatable. Of course, like I said before, Shifter, Nibiru, Droll, if you have them, use them as soon as possible. But back to the cards that everybody is pretty much guaranteed to use in their main board. Monster effect negations like Infinite Impermanence should be used on the Snake Eyes cards if they're opening plays. That's right, big dog. If your opponent is summoning Snake Eyes Ash, you Infinite Impermanence that be out of existence. But there's also a caveat to this. If your opponent starts off by normal summoning Fire King Ponix, use it on the damn Ponix. And the reason why I say you use it there is because if your opponent had a stronger hand, they would never normal summon the Ponix. If they just so happen to have the Kieran monster, your Infinite Impermanence was losing anyways. On the chance that they're leading off with normal summon Ponix, odds are they don't have the resources, and this is the perfect time to negate. Hey, let me get a bacon, egg, and cheese with a side of Ponix, because I'm gonna jump in that dish too. Now, when using Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, you really have to beware of Hida the Fire Charmer. Hida definitely deserves its name because it can turn situations that should be cold all the way up and eventually allow them to link summon into Promethean Princess and Air Blowell, which is a whole problem. So because of this, you really only want to use Ash Blossom on cards that would deplete your opponent's resources. For example, the original Sinful Spoil Snake Eye is a perfect card to use Ash on because they lose a card on the process. But if you don't want to be that risky, or if your opponent has not committed their normal summon, always wait for them to use their Snake Eyes effect to get rid of itself and another monster to Ash. That way you almost guarantee that they have to have a godlike hand to supply more monsters on the field to make the Hida. Now there's something really interesting. If your opponent normal summons Ponix, do not Ash the Ponix. I know it almost seems counterproductive to what I said, but hear me out. We obviously can't affect Valor Fire King Island. With Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, you can use that on the island. So I strongly suggest that if your opponent does at any point in time summon the Ponix, don't use it on the Ponix. Use it on the island to ensure that they can't get island's effects. As far as DD Crow and Ghost Bell, it really depends on the situation. Using DD Crow to banish cards like IP Masquerena when Flamebird uses its effect to target in the graveyard is crazy good. Also, using it on Promethean and Garunix are also crazy good depending on your hand. As for Ghost Bell, you have multiple decisions. You can use it on the Flame Beurge, but you also can use it on the Grunix and the Promethean. It really depends on your situation, but I have to tell you, at any given time, using these card effects will give you some type of momentum in your favor. For the sideboard, it is pretty easy, big dog. Do you play Abyss Dweller? You should be playing Abyss Dweller. Probably in your main extra deck, not in your side deck. But cards that check the graveyard like Gravekeeper's Inscription are godly. There are even players playing cards like Silent Graveyard to completely remove their effects if they don't have access to Dweller. My boy, the time has come. Y'all made fun of me for telling you buy Silent Graveyards before they skyrocket in price, but here we are. Cosmic Cyclone is also incredibly good against the deck. Being able to banish Fire King Island destroys all of their monsters on the field, and a lot of times at inopportune moments. Now you're probably wondering which strategies are incredible against Fire Kings, and it's fairly simple. Decks like Kashtira are huge against the deck because not only do cards like Kashtira Fenrir allow you to banish cards face down, meaning that they're never coming back again, Kashtira Burst can also get rid of those graveyard-reliant cards and ensure that your opponent can't use them for the future. I would have to say that Branded is definitely one of those decks. It's incredibly good against Fire King because every method of removal that Fire King has only plays into Branded's hands. Being able to destroy Mirror Jade is not something you want to do and is not something that most decks take pride for. Also, since Mirror Jade can be summoned over and over again, it's another strategy that can easily banish some of Fire King's most important cards. And then at the end of the day, when the dust settles, there's still the gimmick Puppet Lock. And now that we've pretty much explained how to clap up Fire Kings, we can move on to Snake Eyes, a deck that works very similar to Fire Kings, but doesn't play any Fire King cards. I mean, honestly, this deck is built on being able to summon powerful monsters like Baron de Flor and Borreload Savage Dragon, while still having the access to link into monsters like Promethean Princess and Airblare Well, and still summon monsters like IP Masquerena, SP Little Knight, and Appaloosa Bow of the Goddess. Essentially, it's a Link Synchro-based deck that's really good at playing on the opponent's turn. There are some pretty big similarities between the strategies, but how we stop them is almost the same. So of course, when using cards like Infinite Impermanence against the deck, you want to stop the Snake Eyes Ash. But if your hand is strong, another good point of interaction is using it on the Promethean Princess, because negating the effect of special summon still doesn't change that your opponent cannot summon anything other than fire, meaning that they won't be able to summon monsters like Baron de Flor or Borreload Savage Dragon for their inboard. But one of the key differences about Snake Eyes is how you approach this deck with Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. Now, there is a world where your opponent leads off by activating the spell card Bonfire for their opening play in a Snake Eyes deck. If they just so happen to do that, Ash Blossom. And the reason why you Ash Blossom the Bonfire is because just like Fire King Ponix, it signals that they have a weaker hand. There is no world where a good Yu-Gi-Oh player activates Bonfire first, because that leads them to be Droll and Logbird. It's actually one of the only ways the deck can be drolled. A lot of times they'll lead off with like Snake Eyes Ash, and if you Effect Veiler, then Bonfire goes for Populous. So beware of that. Now, some great side deck cards against Snake Eyes, a lot of them actually overlap with Fire King. This means that both Summon Limit and Cosmic Cyclone are actually incredible. Cosmic Cyclone to be able to banish your opponent's cards that they put into the Spell and Trap card zone. It also prevents them from being able to do some pretty wacky moves and can check their field spell. And Anti-Spell Fragrance is a crazy good card against them. Most of their decks is spells. The Snake Eyes strategy is extremely summon dependent, so some great strategies that are good against them is pretty much any Yu-Gi-Oh deck that can summon El Shadal Winda, whether it's Voiceless Voice, Shadals themselves, or even the Invoke strategy. All of them are fairly effective. And then another great Yu-Gi-Oh deck that's good against them is Fluendereese, because this deck is a little bit more dependent on its Link monsters. Being able to summon Impin can lock out a lot of their great card effects. And that's all that I have for the meta counter guide, big dog. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Of course, if you did, you already know what to do with that subscription button, and make sure you listen to Cali to Don, or Swamana's gonna be coming after you. Of course, if you want to see more amazing content, or if you want me to make a video on another particular thing, be sure to go ahead and check out these videos and let me know down below in the comments section. I'll catch you on the next one.